And then I'm going to turn things over to Véronique.
Thank you. I will share my screen now. Okay, is it okay for you? If and Peter, if you have any problem, you can also drop me a line on the mail, on my own mail. Not that I can answer my mail while giving a lecture. I will never have such skills, and it's not necessary, but it may be,
yes,
it may be useful.
It looks absolutely fine, Véronique. I think we can go ahead.
Okay.
So
Good,
please,
good. Thank
over to you.
Yes, so first of all, of course, thank you so much. Thank you warmly, first for constructing this research group, because I really think it fills a gap. It fills a gap in the research, and we all feel like joining and sharing with you reflections on that highly topical subject. I belong, as you said, to the subgroup working on magical gems. Magical gems, this very special media, I hope it turns, yes, it. A very special media, so glyptic, and we can also include amulets, or let's say amuletic gems in it. A group that is characterized by a number of common features. I will not belong because most of you know them. The fact that they're engraved on both sides, the fact that they have divine names and sometimes very special names that are always written in Greek, and a visual appearance that is very special, mixing Greek deities such as Aphrodite, Venus, Aphrodite, Heracles, but also composition, new creation coming from Egypt. And so just to give you an idea of these names and how they appear, and of course to say that there is this wonderful database of magical gems. So all the material that I will show you is there, and you can research it. And also the topics that I will address have been partly published. And what I will address here is what interests me most, is to understand how these pictures are constructed and what do they tell us about the transformation of religion in the late Hellenistic and Roman imperial period. What is fascinating, as you will see, is that they evidence a continuing artistic, cultural creativity, but on this media, which is glyptic. So in a number of scenes, and I have selected a number of themes, we see conventional mythical figures endowed with new competencies, such as Heracles in a new environment, or Omphale, as we will see, or Athena, as you can already see, as well as new pictures, new figures, such as the lion-headed Knubis. So these elliptic images, and that's where we meet the lifelong research of François Lissarag deconstructing pictures, because we have something similar as on a Greek vase. We have a selection of elements, and these selections means something, aims at something, but what? In that case, we have combination of iconographic elements from the Greco-Roman and from Egyptian tradition. And what is very special, it is that really we have metaphorical construction of a world mixing Egyptian and Greek knowledge. So here I will not solve the debate, but we can debate on that. So I will not solve the debate on the identity of the purveyors of magical gems. It is still open. Who were they? Where were they made? We always say that this production started in the 1st century BC, but this can be debated. The high period is the 2nd and 3rd centuries. So who made them? Egyptian priests, temple craftsmen. We will have few ideas to propose. Where the production centers only in Roman Egypt or elsewhere? Here too I will address these questions, but very quickly. How were they used and for what purpose? So this we know thanks to text, and we know this performative context, and I will show you how it works on pictures. And what we know is that all these pieces, all these images were good, and that's why we like them. They are for luck, for success, for health, for only very positive things, and we need that. So what I will show you is the selection of these 4 topics, just to say that indeed these topics were addressed in a number of publications already that you can find, especially that by Arpad, Katja, and Jeffrey Magical Gems in their context, but also in the last issue of Gemai 2 and 3. And in fact, it was very good to invite me because it makes me realize that in fact I should now write a book because I have papers everywhere. It was just impossible to make one talk just like that. So let's start with old pictures and new stories. In fact, the key element, I think, behind all this production is the historiolae. It has to do with action, and more than that is in making the one who wears the gem the actor of the healing process or of the success. So the key word is historiola. Historiola is well known in magic. It is the little story that you tell, and while you tell it, something happens. You make things happen. You make positive things happen. And we see so old pictures on old gods like Heracles here, having new stories, and the stories about health. Instead of, you see the famous picture of Heracles fighting the lion, he's not just throttling a lion now, he's throttling a disease, he's throttling bile, and it's not any bile, it is your own personal bile. So there is a shift to one's health, to one's body, and it is for me a way for the wearer to think, I am like Heracles, I can be strong, and I can master this disease. And so this is one of the first pieces to show you that it comes from a very ancient, very well evidenced stock of figures, and I just show a scarab with a well-known scarab, so Greek scarab, archaic Greek, with Heracles throttling the lion. But same picture, new stories, and stories concerning the self. This I show you because to show you the longue durée, which is something very fascinating because we are considering the role of Egypt. But in that field, really, we have to do with this longue durée, such as here, Alexander of Tralles, 6th century AD, saying that if you engrave Heracles throttling a lion, it will be very good to wear. And I didn't add the rest, but it has to do with belly aches. And when I was in England, English friends told me that there is a famous water called grip water that was given to, that's still given, I think, to children. And what does it depict? It is for children who have belly aches. It depicts Heracles throttling not the lion, but the snake. So it's quite interesting. It's a long life of a story. Now, let's turn to other patterns. Another pattern is to have new pictures and perhaps new stories, or is there an Egyptian story? On this series of intaglios, you find creatures like this lion-headed snake called Knubis, and this we know for sure, and we studied that intensively with Arpad. We know that because his name is engraved, there is always a sign associated, but remember that sign, you will find it again, this triple S coming back, and it is well known because texts also witness his power. Marcellus Empiricus, for instance, says this is a powerful remedy for stomach ache. On a jasper stone, carve a radiant serpent so that it has 7 rays, enclose it in gold, and use it on the neck. I will not review all the sources we have, just know that there are plenty, and that we know that it has to do with the belly, but not just, and that's where we will meet bilingualism. Some inscriptions are very curious, and this was the last step of my own research. Some inscriptions say crusher of snakes or giant slayer. What kind of giant slayer can this be? And once I was looking at one crystal white chalcedony that you see on top right with this 3S, I had suddenly an image. I thought, yes, of course, crusher of snakes. It's like Heracles, who is the big champion fighting what? Your little articular joint pains. And it is the same with Knubis. The champion of huge snakes is just fighting is fighting your own little snakes. And of course, we know that in antiquity, one of the major health problems was all these parasites that you would have, all these little worms that you would have in your belly. And I think they look very much like three little snakes that you want to get rid of. And there is even an additional feature. It is that the Knubis gems very often are round like pills. And this means this is something that you can suck. And why not suck this kind of pills, which last forever, which is very good, in trying to get rid of that. But it can also have to do with other pains, such as infant stomach pains. And it has been little observed that on gems, there is one actor, there is one person who needs these gems. These are children. And in fact, there are a few inscriptions that concern children, probably carved by the mother for the child, such as the green stone, unfortunately, that has disappeared, but maybe some of you can find it again. It was in Istanbul. Avert, I just put the translation to make it more easy. Avert or tension or indigestions and all pain from the stomach of Julian, whom Nona bore. So Nona is the mother, and it is interesting to see the same scheme as for Deficciones, and in magic you always give the name of a mother, but in that case it may be really the mother caring for belly ache of a child or keep Proclus' stomach healthy. It is very unusual to have such very precise inscriptions, and in that case it may have to do with children. And we have this injunction, pepte, with, so digest, with a 3S, and we will see it again. Because when one can go a step further, Knubis may have been also be used as a milkstone to inside the production of lactation, because governing the belly. And here you have a beautiful example, beautiful and well studied by Rittner in 1984, this Uterine Gems showing how you have a collection of Egyptian deities, not just Knubis, who is a member of the Decans. I forgot to say that he's in Egyptian astrology. He probably comes from Kenmet, which is an Egyptian Decan, but now in a completely, well, in a Romanized context. And here he's very often on top of a cupping device symbolizing the uterus and surrounded here by perhaps Anubis and Isis, and so ensuring this protection. And going a step further, this protection can have to do with the production of milk, because milk, as says Aristotle and others, is not a humor. It is produced by blood. It is a coction. It is a digestion of blood, of menstrual blood. And this digestion produces milk. And then this injunction, such as pepte, digest, could mean that as well. So it could be good for the wet nurse, or it could be good for the mother to produce good milk. And we have one text that is very clear about it. We have a three-headed snake here. The description of a lapidary says very clearly that it has to do with this stone with three heads of Knubis with hair. It's good for women who carry a child in their belly or who are nursing. So again, we have this contiguities between the two. And I think I have just lost an information which is very important. I just go back to it, because when I say that there is no story about Knubis fighting monsters and crusher of snakes, I know we will have a talk by Joachim Quack, and Joachim Quack very kindly told me that the battle of Egyptian gods against the giants, in there Knubis appears. So this could be the Egyptian touch in that scheme. Not only that, because Knubis itself derives from an Egyptian decan, but also because the story, and again, it has to be part of the story is well known in Egypt. And I'm very eager to hear Joachim about it in a month, but maybe he has something to say already. But for me, this is the Egyptian touch, because we don't have the equivalent. Otherwise, we can say there is no story, it was just invented for magic, but a story may have gone on in this realm of historiolae used by magicians to help the healing process, to make you active in the healing process. We have a glimpse now at another figure, which is very unusual, and this gem is almost unique. For Knubis, there are about, and Joachim Quack made a very exhaustive recension, about 400. There are about 400. This one, maybe there are 2 or 3 with a similar scheme. And it is a very interesting piece because it shows well this mingling of Egyptian and Greco-Roman reference in probably in a Romanized Egyptian context. And you will see why I think that there we can say where it comes from. So it is a red jasper from a private collection. And we see a well-known Greek deity. You see there is nothing on the reverse, but it is a very dark, intense jasper. So the stone itself speaks for magic. Also the fact that the inscription is in positive, it is not made to be a seal. And what do we see? We see a well-known Greek deity, Athena, but in a seemingly new story. On the main side, so we see her holding with both hands a double axe, a labris, and she's striking a gigantic snake rising before her. And all classicists here will agree with me, we don't know the story. There is nothing we can compare with. It must come from elsewhere. We see her legs slightly bent, suggesting the weight of the weapon, also the impact of a strike. And she's moving very swiftly because her dress is floating and she has a raised foot behind. And behind, we have 2 seated children. 2 seated children with a disc, a solar disc on their head, meaning they are divine, each holding a hand to the mouth, squatting in a typically Egyptian posture. So a total mixture. So the Athena, the labris, the snake, yes, that's a snake. But the inscription tells us that we have to do with the Hellenized form of Taweret. The inscription says Toeris, so Taweret. So Taweret, how can we proceed? If we look more closely, we see that many things happen in Oxyrhynchus in the 2nd, 3rd century AD, and even a bit before, already in the 1st century AD, because there is a temple, there is a real cult for Toeris assimilated to Athena by the Greek. For the Greek, Athena Toeris is the Thea Megiste, and there are many evidence about it, written ones, and making this very clear. And in common with Toeris and also with Nate, because there is also an assimilation with Nate, the goddess Nate from Sais. Athena and Nate are both patron of craftsmen, but they are also fighters. As Toeris, we will see in a minute, is also a fighter. All these women have a manly dimension, dynamic and manly dimension. The labris itself is a very common weapon in the hands of gods in Roman Egypt. So this is not a surprise. This is the period where you have such a weapon, and it shows well we have to do with a god. And they are also always very, very small. So quite funny. I take it here from Mondo. And in fact, we find also Athena with a double axe in the coinage of the Oxyrhynchus gnome. So really there is something in Oxyrhynchus happening. We know that there was a temple and even an oracle of Toeris. And this is why I could point to a production associated with the temple. It's not impossible. In any case, in the coinage, we find Athena with a double axe, but Athena, no allusion, and with a Nike on the hand, but you see the double axe. And Geissen and Weber studied this coinage from the Gaumünzen, very interesting for our gems. And on a lead token, on several lead tokens, I show you the most beautiful, the theme is there. So there is a transfer from lead token, and we don't know what was the use of these lead tokens. Were they ticket to enter the temple, to get an oracle? Who knows? This is still open. And so there is a transfer from one media to the other. And this one becoming something very personal, a jewelry, something that you wear with you. If I pursue, yes, a few words about Taweret, the Great One, who is oddly not present, and this is also something that we must address, which deities known in the Roman period are present or not on magical gems. There is a selection. For instance, Taweret, the great one, is not there, but we have Athena Toeris. She replaces it. So none on magical gems, many on amulets. So on amulets, we find plenty of Taweret, but she's present in magical spells as Taweris, all those collected by Brashear in 1995. You find a number of these. So these are reflections to pursue, I think. What do we find? What kind of selection? What does it mean? It's not just the pantheon of Roman Egypt. It can be also more subtle. And here I didn't translate, but of course, Nate, and that's where we come back to Nate. The conjunction with Nate can explain the presence of Shu and Tefnut, the two nurslings that Athena Nate is caring for. And of course, I forgot to say, but Taweret, of course, cares for pregnancy, for family life. So this is a sphere that is really common to all this. And here, with the strength of a red jasper, which is which is usually found for very powerful, protection in acute moments. And you have seen the action. Maybe I can go back to this one again. About the historiola, we see a deity who is acting, who is moving, who is doing something, and this is absolutely typical of a gems. So now I will pass to the big topic of my last years, just to show you the range of body parts that are concerned by these gems, and we see there is a strong focus on that belly, which is even today difficult to read, difficult to understand how it works, why it blocks, and so on. And it's no surprise there are so many gems, because for medical doctors I'm sure were never reluctant to use them, even if Soranos says you can let the patient use them. It has no effect. Some, like Galen, said yes, it can have an effect because it's a physica. It is the stone itself has an effect. So just to show you the range and to show you that it has to do really with societal concerns. So first, the belly for all kinds of reasons, including the worms. I think the worms are very important, but also the eyes were very important, and all these joint pains were very important, but I will not go into that. I will focus on the so-called uterine gems, and there are two groups, but I think it's important to know there are two groups, one on hematite and one on jasper. The group on hematite is very interesting because of the metaphoric value of a stone, the hematite. Hematite also because it's not only connected with Egypt, but with Mesopotamia. And I cannot help thinking that in Mesopotamia, they use so much hematite for seals, for all kind of production. It must have given an ancient touch to the magical gems worn in the Roman period. It was as a way to say, look, I have a very, not only ancient, but powerful since centuries stone, but with very modern design. So I have just the best product for you to help. And in the lapidaries, it is well explained. And going on, I discovered how much it was kind of yin-yang effect, because the stone itself is the blood of a man. It is the blood of Uranos, again, a god. So the god is in the blood. So it is in the stone, because you know the stone, when you crush it, it's red. It is even a pigment to use for Pompeian painting. It's very, very powerful. And they knew that it's a powerful pigment. So the drop of his blood, and not any blood because it is castration, this blood in the stone is good for generation, but it is a male blood. And so it is quite interesting to underscore that. Then we have the image of a cupping device. And this cupping device, we can say it is a really Greco-Roman device. The Egyptian never used a cupping device, but around you have the Ouroboros, which is purely Egyptian. It's not a Greek topic. And for me, the device, this cupping device, tells us not about attraction, and it has has to do also with a stone, because this black stone reminds magnetite stones that attracts, and it has to do with this power of attraction of not only the cupping device, but also the womb that can attract. And that's why I state, I give Oribasius, often men feel their virile member attracted into the womb as if it were a cupping device. So it has to do with imagination. But you will tell me now, this is very odd because this is an object. And for me, this was a big problem. Where's the God? And I think the God may be behind the cupping device, because the cupping device is the emblem of medical doctors, human medical doctors, but not just. If you look at coinage, Greek coinage, there was recently a fantastic book made with the repertory of all places where was a sanctuary of Asclepios, and how to identify them. It is through coinage. And what does the coinage show? The god, Asclepios, and the cupping device. So for ancient eyes, the cupping device could also mean the god, could also mean the action of a god. And anyway, it has to do with this autonomy of the organ, this strength of the organ. Where is Egypt? Maybe the Egypt is in the other elements of the picture, because we have a cupping device, we have what we call sometimes ligaments, so elements that are added to show that it has to do with the human organ, not just an object. Some said that it has to do with Alexandria, with dissections. Why not? But it's not very anatomical. It is more meaningful compared with this need to show that it's not just an object, but it has to do with humans. But also, I cannot help finding analogies with the horns of a ram, like here in Esna, in Ptolemaic temple of Esna, where Khnum has such really some similar horns, and Khnum is the one molding on his tour, molding the child to come, and it has to do with what happens in a womb and what has to be protected in the Ouroboros. And sometimes Khnum himself is holding the cupping device, symbolizing the womb. And again, you see all the Egyptian gods around, including Bess, and I will come back to Bess in a minute. So you see, that's very subtle. I even wonder whether we don't have an allusion to the four Mesrenet, the goddesses of birth, to explain these funny elements here. We know that in ancient Egypt, the terminative to say the uterus could look like that, and we find that on the top of the Mesrenet, again in Dendera, so similar period. So there can be also a transfer, an iconographic transfer beside so the medical one. This is to show you that there are alternatives, and that depending on the eyes you had, Egyptian or Greek, you could see other things. Now, using an object for a body, piece of a body, an inert object for a human organ may seem strange, but this is also very Egyptian, because not only we had the canopic jars, but also the heart itself was depicted as such, as a pot in scenes of a Book of the Dead. Again, I will not elaborate on that, but it's very striking that the idea, the concept could have been Egyptian. And also, we know that we have also a recipient called the Keret of Nephthys, which is the divine uterus, again a pot, which must ensure the rebirth of the dead. So using a pot, using a cupping device for the human organ and associating it with birth can be an Egyptian idea and not a Greek idea. Then we have a key, and we know from Festus and others that these keys have to do with delivery, and the key is very Roman. This is a Roman key. We find them in ex voto of all kinds. So this is to show you a real Roman key. This one was found in a sanctuary of the 2nd century BC in Etruria with an inscription. And just for the fun, I show you again the longue durée. This is a wax ex voto from Switzerland, 20th century, beginning of the 20th century, for a happy delivery in a sanctuary of Maria in Valais. So This is again new avenues. But to show you that this image of a key can help us perhaps with dating reproduction, because this topic, this motif is found around the neck of Anubis canidae dogs. This is on the mummy linen, 2nd century AD, on a mummy label, and it has to do with passages. So it can also be read this way with Greek eyes, and even technically can mean opening or closing the uterus, but it can also mean passage from the cows from nothing to life, and so safeguarding this passage, as does the Anubis dog here. And so it is here with his nice key. But this key happens only in the Thebaid region, and 2nd century, 4th century AD. So it can help us localize a period for reproduction. So the motif could be understood again with Egyptian eyes and associated with an important image, that of a passing. And just to show you that there is even a key, as here it is in the British Museum, which has the head of Anubis. So it confirms that it works. Yes, oh, sorry. So now I pass to my big topic, which is omphale. Omphale is a lifelong topic, I think. Omphale on gems is a motif that you find only on gems, and that's why it is very interesting and very important. It's a variant of a story that is hardly described in text. So I show you the few pieces we have. We know that Omphale, queen of Libya, marveled at Heracles when he was he had done silly things where he was expiating a crime, a blood crime. He had killed Iphitus, and so he had to be enslaved with Omphale. We know from Diodorus, there are very few comments that she marveled at him, she married him, so there was a love story with them. In the Roman period, authors quite like the story and elaborate on it and say that even they exchange roles, that there is a cross-dressing between the lovers, and he's even fooled with sexual passion, and he abandons his male identity, as in this story by Ovid, that Omphale arrayed Hercules in her own garb with tunics and so on. But we see that he's not that threatened because it doesn't hold on him. For his belly, the girdle was too small, the bracelet he had broken, his big feet split the little shoe. So there is not that much threat, in fact, but they change roles. And the solution of Samosata, they like to play with it, they like to laugh at the story, to say that you the champion, you were a slave. I have never been a slave like you, never combed wool in Lydia, masquerading in a purple shawl and being slippered by an Omphale. And I show you two contrasted views. The Roman one, which is very wise, I mean, very calm. We have a pair, we have a sort of equilibrium between the pair. While in the Renaissance, they really loved the story and they developed visually from Rubens and others. So why this silence and what does it mean? And I just show you first a few slides with the understanding of the Roman painters, as here in the house of Lucretius. Here, yes, we have sort of gender trouble, let's say, of Heracles, but in fact he struggles more because of wine, because he has drunk. So it's more the triumph of Dionysus and wine than that of Omphale and sexual passion. So he's a bit clumsy. He is drunk. He's leaning on a strange figure on the left, and in sharp contrast we have Omphale holding her club. Or here we on the right. What do we see? The young Hercules reclining on his lion skin, dressed in female garb, in a light white chiton, and Omphale just looking at him. There is no really strong change of dress, nothing very strong. Where it becomes interesting, it is on magical gems. Here the discourse changed completely. First, all the things, all the gems I will show you are on jasper. I insisted already on red jasper. We have a text by Dioscorides, De Materia Medica, saying that all jaspers are said to be amulets used as personal ornaments and to speed delivery tied to the thigh. So give us a clue that really it has to do with strong moments, and it's not anything. So here, what do we see? We see a crouching woman, and this was the key thing, the key gems. I showed you the next one. Yes, it is in the Skoluda collection, so in a private collection in Hamburg. So a woman facing us, squatting, holding a little recipient. And what would we say if we had not the inscription? We would say maybe a prostitute, maybe, we don't know. And the inscription is very clear. The inscription says omphale. And in fact, this squatting position calls to mind another series of squatting positions. There are not many, but one very famous because there are not many. In the British Museum, again, a red jasper with an inscription with sorrow having to do with delivery. And on one side, the woman squatting on a delivery bed, a delivery chair, surrounded by the Ouroboros, protecting the procedure. And on the other hand, on the other side, we have the free kappa, as we had the very first gem, so having to do probably with the belly, protection of the belly, so kolike, and so on. Yeah. So we have a little series, and this was fascinating because I started with 1, 2, now I have about 12. So there is a real production and meaningful production with regular elements. And what kind of regular elements? On the other side, we have these funny animals, donkey-like animals. This one is lost, but I put it here because there is an inscription. There was an inscription to omphale. Unfortunately, this gem is lost again, if somebody knows where it is, but it has disappeared. So on one side, the naked women, almost sitting, both knees bent. I'm sure it was that. Omphale on the round margin, so it's not that piece. And on the other side, an antelope jumping. So it's not an antelope, it is something else. As we can see here, in Oslo, again, red jasper, squatting woman. And here you can already guess, she has a Leonte of Heracles. So no name, but the Leonte. And on the other side, we have this animal, and you see the free S that we saw before with Knubis. So it has to do with the protection of the belly or the inside. Something is endangered. Yes, I think I have put you the triple S, the control of belly pains. And we can go further. So there's this Cassel, this red carnelian. And what is interesting is that we see we don't have just one workshop. We have different workshops with different interpretation of the topic. And this is important because it means that the series were even larger, and because you could adapt. And perhaps also the individual dimension. She's frontal this time. She's holding the club. She's holding the club, and with a very enlarged belly, perhaps alluding to pregnancy this time. And again, we have a funny donkey on the other side. But we find again in Bonn, the Rheinisches Museum, this time the woman is seen in profile on a chair. Maybe that's the birth chair. That can be the birth chair. And we found again the donkey-like animal with the free S. The free S. And here in Malibu, in the Paul Getty Museum, what is interesting in both cases, it is the very active posture of a woman. She's holding the club above her head, and she's going to hit the animal, which is on the other side. So she's not passive at all. She's, again, very active. And this one is interesting because it was found as a bracelet. So it was part of a bracelet, something you could wear either at the wrist or the ankle, who knows. And another little series, some are lost. So this time the woman is standing frontal. I give you two views because I never know how it looks like. And we have a jumping antelope. And here I show it to you because what I find interesting, it is a Bass-like posture. And we know, and you will see where I come. So there is a contiguity with Bass, the frontal squatting Bass. If I pursue, one variant, and that's why I showed you the hematite, is in hematite. And in this variant, we find again the animal jumping, but instead of omphale, and that's where, again, working with series can help understanding what we have. Instead of omphale, we have a cupping device, which means really it has to do with the belly, with its protection. And here, so we have no figure, because perhaps it is hematite, but we find again the animal. And I will not elaborate on the inscriptions, but there is aurore youth. So again, it has to do with delivery, with the protection of the belly. Yes. So in some places, we have Heracles that comes in for protecting women's belly. And this may sound strange, but he protects the pain. So first, as on this beautiful, it's again from the Scoluria collection, this wonderful jasper, he's throttling the lion. Above, an Ouroboros containing cupping device, we have a free kappa, so we have everything. And on the other side, there is the inscription. It may not be surprising because we know that Hercules in his life has affinities with women. You know, he was a lover over time. He had plenty of children. He had hundreds of children. Well, let's say about 100 children. So he knows well women's belly. And that's why he can change role with omphale, because his hyper-masculine man is very close to women. And the contrast, it goes together. And that's why here, he's the one controlling the pain of the belly. Controlling the pain, we know that Heracles and Hippocrates were also twins in coinage. On one side, Heracles, on the other side, you have Hippocrates, but there is also an Egyptian link. Think of the Bass here on the Ouroboros containing all kinds of diseases, this Pantheos controlling diseases. So this is the same idea of control. The visual image is Egyptian. What is fascinating, so that we have this kind of bilingualism, we have either omphale fighting the donkey, or we have Heracles fighting the lion. We have never omphale fighting the lion. We have never Heracles fighting the donkey, but it is similar. It is the same idea, controlling pain, perhaps belly pains. Yes, so we have seen this one already. Just to show you that this animal has a meaning in Egypt. In Egypt, a donkey means evil. And when you want to write something evil, you're always writing with a determinative of a donkey, disease, suffering. So it's all that is bad. He's with this. And think of a jasper, and think also of an Isiac knot, always in red jasper. So maybe again, Egypt is in the stone. Egypt is in the stone, in the red jasper. And we find this set-like, Setian-like animal on some gems controlling the womb, but also, and that's probably more important, we find omphale controlling herself the danger. And that's the most important message, probably. There is a pun, there is a play on a word, because in Greek, skutale or palon means the phallus and means the club. So she's holding the weapon that is threatening her. And in old publication, you will read that she's being raped by a donkey. She's not raped at all, she's hitting the donkey. And the engraver even added here the womb to make sure that you would understand that it has to do with that protection. And you see her lion skin, you see the club. So there is a play between the two. The animal does not touch her. She's the one mastering her body and mastering the dangers. Yes, and this is just to show, to prove, if I need to, that this is really synonymous. There is a story with Priapus saying, I have a weapon, and this is my mentula. My mentula is a weapon. So for sure, this is a weapon. And we have a bilingual gem. And that's why it is fascinating, because we have here on one side, it is jasper. In the British Museum, there is one piece where they are the two together. On one side, omphale, and on the other side, Heracles. And what is funny, it is when it was published, it was said that she's losing water because she's delivering. No, that's the phallus of a donkey. And you have a free kappa, and you have a little legs of a donkey. If you compare with a complete gem, it is very clear. Heracles throttling the lion, Omphale fighting the donkey. When I say bilingual, it means that I think of something Egyptian, and you will see in a moment what it is. But here, the elements are very Greek, the club, the leonte, and apparently, so very Greek. But we can go on. So this is to show you the series that we have now, that are collected now, which shows that this is not anecdotal. There is something on, there is something on, and it tells us about the power that women could also think of themselves over their own body, not just victims. So I was wondering why did they choose in a Greek or an Egyptian milieu Omphale? Omphale is and has to do with he's transnational. If you look at the Song of Solomon, and this was translated into Latin, this travels also in Greek, there is this comparison between the navel and metaphorically, and human and women's sexual organs, sexual attraction. And it is an euphemism to say the navel instead of saying more. And in Fulgentius, in the mythologies of Fulgentius, it is even very explicit. It says, Hercules fell in love with Omphale, who persuaded him both to soften the delicate shrunken parts of fibers, so to weave wools and to whirl the spindle. He is conquered by lust, for Omphalon in Greek means the navel, for lust is ruled in the navel by women. And it has all to do in a kind of archaeology of words with meaning much more than that, of course, meaning sexual attraction. So there is a play between omphalos, the belly button, the fetus, and the sex, so sexual and maternal power. And this is something special because by us, we are used to distinguish, but why choose? And you can have both. Why? So to be an attractive woman and an attractive mother, and this is what is Omphale. And maybe that's why she was so popular in all kinds of media, because we will see she appears also on gems, normal gems. So Heracles is of course very meaningful, and I show you knots and knots because Heracles has to do with knots also, the knot of Heracles that we find, and the knots in general that we find protecting women's lives, so the knot of Isis as well as magical knots. Pliny speaks about this magical knot of Heracles that are very good because it makes wounds heal very speedily. And I just quote this passage of Pliny we can go back to, and just to show you that it is found in women's jewelry, the Heracles knot. Elisabetta Gadgetti has a beautiful paper in the last issue of Gemai. And we find it also in Festus, telling us about marriage rites in Rome. The knot of Hercules is the way, because it's a strong knot, but it's very easy to untie. If you are doing if you have a ship, you know what I mean. You just pull and puff, it goes away. But also it is very strong, and so it means good luck. So that the woman will be fertile by producing children, just as Hercules had 70 children. So these belts are very, very important. But perhaps the key thing that was left unnoticed for a long time, Hercules himself is born from a knot that is untied, because his mother, Alcmene, could not deliver. She was tied by Hera and by the Moirai, and Galintias, the servant, found the trick and say, oh, he's born. And so the Moirai, the Elitia, they raise their hands and they untie their hands. And so Heracles is born from untied knots. And that's why I think there is this strong link also with Heracles and women. Now the Egyptian touch, and I will end with that. Maybe there is an Egyptian story, and I have not yet reached the end of it. Because this magical omphale, for me, is present in other kinds of material, in other media, like the terracotta we know from Roman Egypt, the pseudo-bobo group, where you can see the similitudes of the types. In some, this one comes from Cyprus. It is kept in Cyprus, in Larnaca. She even has the club. So she is clearly an omphale. Here we have a proof. Or here she has the leonte and she has the club. That's a little bronze. It's a very little thing. With more Egyptian types, we have this kind of figurines, and we know when we know where they were found in domestic shrines in the house for protection of the house. And this one is interesting because you can see that on the crown it has an eye, a protective eye. And I think I have another one here. Yes, it is on top of a lamp, where we find this baobo omphale on top of an eye. And just to show you again, because I think there are affinities with the Bess and protecting childbirth and so on, with also a Nujat eye. So there is a similitude, but the main similitude is there. In fact, don't we have to do with the Bess Heracles? And then we understand why it was produced in Egypt, because Bess and Heracles, I don't need to make a demonstration, they are connected, the giant and the dwarf. As always, the two extremes go together. And we would have a Besset omphale, this is in Fribourg, a very interesting piece, a faience, where the dwarf, the female dwarf, is protected by Bess. And I published a series because there is a well-known series of little bronze of a type, where we have a pregnant woman on a frog, and she's protected by Bess. But in Munich, we have a squatting Besset, looking terribly like our omphale. So for me, this explains why these gems were produced. And for me, these gems should be produced first in an Egyptian milieu, understanding that with the two views. And for showing how these images could be transferred in different milieu in Roman Egypt, here's a little gold pendant, and this gold pendant from a private collection may be the one hanging on a Fayum portrait, which is in New York. When I visited New York, I didn't see it first because there was a glass before the window, but when I gave speech already about omphale to the team, they said, but we have an omphale on a Fayum portrait. And they sent me this picture. And it is very clear that she has such pendant, she has an omphale. So we have a proof that in this Hellenized milieu, a woman could wear such element as a protection along with other ones. And I will end with that slide. So what could be the Egyptian element? So how shall we call her? Besset, Baobo, omphale. We know skirt lifting stories by Hathor in Papyrus Chester Beatty, the contending of Horus and Set. There is a passage well studied among others by Yuri Volokin, but it's a nice paper because he makes the links between Hathor and Baobo. I add omphale, of course, how Hathor rejoices by lifting her skirt, as do these figurines. And again, what is fascinating is the longue durée of these little pendants that we find in Greece, in Rome. Some come from Pompeii, going round, and also in different media, such as this knuckle bone, which this one I think is also about a few of them. One is in Basel, one is in New York, another one is preserved in Cairo, where you have this squatting woman. So again, an omphale for me, and on the knuckle bones, so meanings, why do you throw knuckle bones? It is for divination, for luck. And we know there was this sanctuary in Oxyrhynchus of Athena Toreris, so where we know that this could be joined. So I end here my discourse about this bilingualism in Graeco-Egyptian amulet gems, to show you I hope to have shown you the complexity and the cultural complexity of this species, which clearly could be read with Greek, Roman eyes, as well as by Egyptian eyes, and each would understand something. They were really transnational, and it tells us a lot about iconographic discourse and the subtlety of this iconographic discourse. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Véronique, for that absolutely wonderful and fascinating paper, which really did bring out as you said at the end, the complexity of the language of images and how it works in a bilingual and bicultural society. I couldn't imagine a better paper with which to start this series, to get us into the sorts of questions that we're interested in thinking about. This is now the discussion section of the evening is open. I'd ask people if you could please not to use the hands up signal, because there are just too many of us. But if you could please just put your name in the chat, then we'll know that you have a question or a comment to make. And if you don't feel like talking in front of so many people, by all means, please put your question in the chat, and I'll be glad to interpret for you. But yes, if does anyone have anything to anything to say?
Maybe I will put my slides in a different presentation, so that we can skip to one picture to the other in case there is a discussion.
Yes, that would be excellent. Thank you. Yes. I
try to do it. Maybe I have to leave and start again. Huh? Don't worry.
Yes, I think it's easier that way.
Yes, outside. Yeah. Do you see it or do you see my screen still?
Yes, we see it. We see you fine.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
As well, while people are thinking, I just happen to be completely ignorant about this, but I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the relationship between Heracles and Bass. You said that it was something that everyone knows, but I'm fascinated by the prospect of learning something about it.
Yes. Oh, it goes through the Levant and goes through Cyprus. Already in Egypt, we know that this image of the dwarfs can become the giants who hold the sky. And we have this image of Bess holding the sky, the Bess with the giants. So these two extremes. Connections are best known in Cyprus. There is a book by Isabelle Tassignon about the king of Cyprus, the king Bess of Cyprus, who is Heracles. So he's Heracles, Bess in the guise of Heracles. We know this character also. Alexandra Nisi published on these scarabs, where we have Heracles Bess. How can I say? There's an ambiguity between the two. I would even add there are ambiguities with Bess and satyrs, and again creatures watching not only nature, procreation, sexuality. There is a whole family. Bess is a family of divinities patronizing passages and many things having to do with life, with domestic family life. And yes, but visually, yes, go to Isabelle Tassignon's book about Cyprus, and you will find material there.
Thank you. I think, yes, sorry, just to Sharon, yes, the recording will be available eventually. I'm not exactly sure when. We need to organize ourselves, but we hope to put the recordings up. So we have a question from Anna Troja. 2 remarks to the Egyptian reading. She says that there's no evidence at all that Anubis as a mummy even exists. I've never found this deity depicted or called this way. Maybe it's worth to consider that instead of Anubis, one of the 4 sons of Horus and the protection god of the canopic jars, Duamutef, is presented there. It's very typical and well-known iconography of him. Plus, he was the protector of the stomach in general. I don't know, Véronique, do you want to respond to this? And then, yeah.
Yes, I agree totally. Yeah, you know, I've painted with big brush. sorry for not mentioning that, but of course, I agree totally.
Yeah, and the second question, the ram-headed deity, perhaps Khnum on the Uterine Gems, has always on the top of his head the solar disk. Also, it belongs to a solar context. The ton of depictions in Egypt of the old form of the solar god himself, with the Schraube horn and other types of horns as well. I think that on the Uterine Gems, the birth of the sun, Discus Re, from the sky goddess Nut, was parallelized with the normal birth, together with the moving uterine motif, bringing the micro and macrocosm together. What do you think?
I will try to read it.
Yeah.
The ram-headed deity. Oh, the sun is everywhere. The sun is crucial. The sun protects. That's why also Knubis has this radiant crown in magic, and essentially in magical media. And so the solar touch is always very important. And horns. Yes, I would not like to restrict one interpretation, because anyway, in antiquity, I mean, I don't have the eyes of all the Egyptians, and each depending on the region, and that's why it is also, it's not to say we don't know, we cannot say, but I think it would be wrong to be dogmatic and see only one interpretation. We must remain very flexible and open. And but the horns there with Khnum, because Khnum there is a connection in the chronology. We are also speaking of a Ptolemaic period when these gems appear. So I also try to connect chronologically when it is possible, the themes, the visual themes.
Thank you. We have a question from Maria Anastasiadou about whether the materials used for magical gems always have a specific symbolism. Could there be cases where you simply choose a gem because the material looked attractive?
Yes, I just looked to. So Maria.
Yes.
Of course, the material is one major part of the power of a stone. And this we can evidence. I didn't mention him because he's often mentioned again in the realm of magicians, Galen, Dr. Galen. There is a very interesting paper by Jacques Joanna about Galen and amulets. How did medical doctors relate to this material? Galen says the green stone advised for Knubis gems is indeed, and it is prescribed by Nekepso, by King Nekepso, who doesn't exist, but there was a treatise by King Nekepso that Galen knew. It is true, it is good. I have myself made an amulet made of that stone, and I have worn it above my stomach, and it was good for my stomach. But I don't remember whether he adds it. I think he even adds the picture. Don't bother for the picture. Don't bother for the picture. The stone is important. And this is really this question of lithotherapy. We are in the middle of that. And this again is so long. You can enter any shop now and you can buy stone, good for health, good for your heart, good for your mood, good for your, and anything. It is the same idea. So it always relates to the body to one way or the other. So yes, the material is crucial. And in the image of Athena Toeris, in the paper I wrote for Arpad and Katja and Jeffrey Spear, I make the suggestion that this red can have to do with the story of Apophis being killed, where there's a big fire. So the red stone, the red mountains where this happened, which is still red. Or it can have to do with the red of the blood too. Yes. So yes, always. So there are many connections, and the lapidaries, the Greek lapidaries, describe these connections. Since Theophrastus, they describe the connection between the color, the type of stone. But the difficulty sometimes is to understand what they mean by the color, or what they mean by the type of stone. What is a prasis, for instance? Is it what we mean? Still, there we would need to have geologists, to have people, mineralogists working with us, and to elaborate common vocabulary from the ancient sources. This would be very precious. At the time, we just work with what we have, so we cite other specialists of gems, but I know that mineralogists would use another term. And so this is interesting because there is more to do. There are avenues. So yes, the answer is yes. The stone is important.
Thank you. Yes, we have a couple of other questions. Sorry, to Hélène. Yes, it's the next programs of the seminar are on the Graeco-Aegyptiaca website at UCL, or else in the Palladian workshops website. But if you sign up if you send me an email, I can put you on our mailing list, and then you will be informed of all the future programs. And thank you. Yeah, so we have a question from Ash. Can you see it, Véronique?
Yes. Direct evidence, Isis Eileithia. The only one I can think of, and I will try to see, I have pictures, is when we have Isis and her sister around the mummy of Osiris. I don't know if I have Isis and Nephthys. I don't know if I have one here. They are making movements. They are moving hands, moving arms. And here and there, I couldn't help thinking with Greek eyes to the birth of Athena, for instance, where Athena pops out from the skull of Zeus, and he's surrounded by helpers, the Eileithia. And it's the same gesture. They are with their arms towards the head. But I don't think I have one here, but I could send you one. Yes, so maybe there are connections there, but it's subtle. It is subtle.
Does that gesture occur later in Greek art? Because I'm familiar with it from 6th century black figure vase painting, but not from later.
Yes, yeah, that's the problem. We have a gap. That's a big problem. Again, that's why this was the same when we talked about the horns and so on. I was trying to bridge, not to have this gap, to find something similar. And for the birth of Athena from the skull of Zeus, well, that's the problem. Yeah, that's the main problem. But the gesture, yes. And here about Khnum, that's why I think this one, for instance, this gem shows well the role of Khnum. He is depicted. He is depicted holding the cupping device. So for sure, he's connected with his skin, which doesn't prevent other gods to be connected with a solar disk moreover on top of his head. Yes. So yes, so direct, no direct. And are made under specific astrological election. This question you must ask Fabio Spadini, who just finished his beautiful PhD on astrology and magical gems and gems in general, because here and there, that's why he has now got a new ground to go on with his research, trying to find connection between astrology, but also skies, real skies. So astrological election, yes, so there are connections with astrology. And the association of protection, yes, jasper is strong. Jasper is this red jasper because it is intense, it is not translucid, so it means something powerful. And Dioscorides, I think he doesn't say specifically. He says it's jasper are good as amulets in general. And so this we can keep. It's good for everything. But you have yellow jasper, green jasper,